Now, whether you model diesels or steam, the Siphon G could bring something a little different to your layout. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. I had a message the other day from Acura Scale. They said, we're reaching out to see if you'd be interested in doing a review of our new Siphon G. I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound. After all, I do own 6 from the previous manufacturers. So comparison is quite straightforward. But more than that, how can we use Siphon Gs within our train configurations? Now, just a couple of minutes of history. Now, I like these books. They are Ramsay's Model Trains, comes in 2 volumes, and this is edition 8. There is an edition 9 on the market, well, issued, but it's like hen's teeth. You just can't get hold of the things. But they're a great reference if you want to know the history of the model's production, i.e. where it was sold and where the moulds ended up and all this sort of stuff. Right, so using this, I managed to piece together where the moulds went and who produced the original Siphon Gs, which is quite interesting. But before we go down that avenue, I just want to mention these pieces of rolling stock, because the bottom one is a Siphon H and the top one is a Siphon G. Now, the Siphon H has end doors and both of them have their frames on the outside. And horizontal wooden planking. Now, as you can see here, the Siphon H is actually taller than the Siphon G, and accordingly it was used to transport odd items really, including theatre flats, where you get a travelling theatre would go from one to another, and obviously you've got the sets. Well, the sets will go much easier into a Siphon H because of the end doors and the increased headroom than the Siphon G. And also elephants. I'm not even making this up. Elephants would be transported in these type of vehicles, and the Siphon H was used for that type of thing. Okay, let's whiz back and talk about moulds from these Ramsay's books. Now, in 1978, Lima brought out its first Siphon G, and I've got a few examples here. And as far as I can figure out, the Lima Siphon G always stayed with Lima, and I don't know where Lima was sold on to, but I can't find another manufacturer that's using the Lima mould. However, there was also an Airfix mould in 1980. Airfix then sold the mould on in 1982 to Mainline, and then Mainline sold it on to Dapol in 1985. And if we look at the underside of these 2 Siphon Gs, you can see where the word Mainline is now missing, because they've obviously scraped it away as the mould was then sold on to Dapol. So these GWR ones, what were they fundamentally used for? We must have had a purpose. Well, it was the carriage of milk by milk churn. And in the southwest area, then obviously you've got your cows and everything else. Milk goes into the churn goes into these, and then these go to the city, let's say. But how is there no photographs of them? Well, it's all to do with the fact that railway enthusiasts are obviously fickle people, because they take photographs of the shiny locomotive and a couple of coaches, but they never take a photograph of what's lurking on the back of the train, which is where these lived. They were all express passenger rated, but when the train would say go into Paddington, you don't need this at the front of the train because it's going to be locked in by the coaches. So they were attached to the rear of trains. So when you get into your city, in goes your pannier tank, gets the milk off the back and gets it to the dairy to keep it fresh. And that's the reason why obviously all the louvers are here and all this ventilation is to allow the throughput of air to keep the milk cool. And that's what it was all about, getting the milk from the dairy, as it were, from the farm into the churns into the stations into the metropolis, let's say, and then getting through then into the dairy and then out into the consumer. That's what it's all about. But as I said, I can't show you a photograph because people only take photographs of the pretty locos and stuff, don't they? Okay, enough of that. Right, let's get a comparison going between the new Acura Scale and the Lima. Now, just before we kick off, could I ask you please to give us a thumbs up and definitely subscribe? Gaining subscribers is what keeps YouTubers going. It really is the motivation, and perhaps if you ring the bell icon, then you might get a notification, or you might not. Okay, what have we got? So here we have one of the brand new Siphon Gs from Acura Scale, and similarly a mint condition Siphon G from Lima. It just happens to be 45 years older. Now, if you're not into unboxings, then this is your kind of channel. They both come in boxes, they're well packaged. Obviously, the Acura Scale is in the standard ice cube packaging. It comes with instructions and a pack of pipes. Well, here we have them. So there we go. And it is in absolutely mint condition, this one. It is a beautiful example of a 45-year-old mould. I'm not too sure exactly when Lima produced it, but it is in blisteringly mint condition. But more importantly, this is the edition from Accurascale. Now, looking a little closer at the Accurascale version of the Siphon G, it has rubberized doors, which seem rather strange, but there we go. It's a nice little feature, actually. The underframe detail is little short of astonishing, although I can't help but feel that all this this beautiful pipe work just seems a little bit kind of nugatory, really. Unless you run your layout on mirrors, you're never going to see any of this. Obviously, from the side, I mean, it's lovely. And if I be so bold as to put the Lima one on top, you can see that the Lima one does have the right boxes and the dynamo in the right place and the brake reservoirs. But then again, this is 45 years old, so this is a nifty little model. But I think we would all take it for granted that it's a decent model with good details. But what about the specs? Now, I've turned it upside down and popped it in a cradle. And this might sound a bit geeky, but when I get my models, I tend to test them with a DCC Concepts 14.5mm back-to-back gauge, and it works quite simply, really, because you ram it into the wheels, and if the wheels are too close together, then clearly it will force them apart. If it's too loose, you have to take the wheels out and push them together and then re-gauge them. Now, using my digital caliper, I can obviously gauge the wheels. Now, hopefully you can see that up there, that this wheel comes in at 14.49. So it's pretty good when you consider I'm after 14.5. And if I run along these, 14.48, 14.48, 14.45. So roughly speaking, they're marginally under spec. But this is the dilemma. If they were wildly undersized and I needed to correct them, how do I do it? Because I simply can't use this back-to-back gauge, because if I push down here, I break all this intricate brake rodding. I can't change the axles either, because I can't understand how I get all this lot out to do it. I mean, there might be a way of doing it, but it's beyond me at the moment because all this wonderful stuff is in here. But I physically can't force this down because it will interfere with the brake rodding. Whilst it's a wonderful detail, I can't help but think that these pieces here are nugatory and they shouldn't have bothered with them, and it could cause more problems than it's worth in later times when I want to take these wheels out and clean them or correct the back-to-backs and that sort of thing. It all looks charming, but it's a bit over the top. Now, I thought I'd take it a stage further, and obviously this bogie was held in with this screw in here, so I've taken it off thinking that I might be able to turn it over and remove the wheels from the other side, but no, all the support webbing is there so they don't come out this way. And can I get the gauge in any better on this side? Well, marginally I can just about get it in, but it's not really doing a great deal. I can't exactly ram it through into its normal position. So we are where we are. If I need to take these out to change them or clean them properly or whatever, I would probably end up taking a pair of snips to just this thin brake rodding. Not that you're going to be able to see it missing anyway, because it is so minute really. I would perhaps I would leave this brake rodding here in, that's fine, but the bits on the bogie themselves offers more problems than it's worth really. So there we go. Right, let's have a look at the couplings. Now, bringing another Acura Scale Siphon D into play and using their standard fitted tension lock couplings, I'll bring alongside a scale ruler. Now this is a 4mm to the foot scale ruler. Now hopefully you can see that the scale distance between the buffers is actually 3.5 foot, which actually in Chadwick world is too great. So what can we do about that? Well, they have in their wisdom supplied some tiny magnetic couplings. So we shall fit these and see what we get. Now as usual, to remove the coupling, you just squeeze in the two bits together and pop straight out, revealing the NEM pocket. Now before I go any further, I want to test the height of the pocket. Now hopefully here you can see the empty NEM pocket on the Wagon. And this little beastie here is a Symboa NEM pocket height gauge. And as you can see, the little tang that pokes out, that should line up perfectly if the NEM pocket on the Wagon has been constructed to the right height. So if we push them together and perfect, absolutely perfect. And that is a rare commodity. Why is it so important? Well, certainly for KD coupling, NEM coupling users, it's crucial because you can't adjust the height of the coupling itself. So if this is constructed properly, your KDs will work properly. You'll find Bachmann and Hornby coaches and wagons with steps in their couplings, and I'll just show you a couple. So here is our NEM coupling from the Siphon G, and here is a coupling from my rather large box of couplings from another Wagon. It's either a Hornby or a Bachmann, to be perfectly honest. And as you can see, there's a large step in the side in the coupling height. So when they couple together, you'd think everything's brilliant. But the reason is for this large step is because when this was designed, the NEM pocket on the Wagon or coach, whatever it was too high. So they then put a step into the coupling. But when you fit a KD coupling into this socket, it's clearly going to be a lot higher than the KD coupling that goes into the NEM socket of the correct height pocket. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Anyway, 4 points to Accurascale for getting their pocket height right. Beautiful. So I've inserted the magnetic couplings into the NEM pocket on both of my Siphon Gs, and there you can see them pretty well locked in, and the distance between them is only 1 foot, which is absolutely astounding really. But I must confess I need very, very little pressure to pull these apart, and I'm afraid that there is no way that these are going to hold together if they're involved with a train coming up my Helix. I just know these lack power, and to be perfectly honest, are they a little close together? Because the last thing you want is to get buffer clash. So let's stick them on top of the Helix and see what they look like there. Well, here they are on the third radius curve of the Helix, which is the downline, and as you can see, the buffers are actually touching. It's not the end of the world, they are spring-loaded buffers after all, but it's the fact that they are so small and so weak that I need to try them with a stronger magnetic solution. So let's have a look at Hunt couplings from West Hill Wagon Works. Now the first example is using Hunt coupling elites, and these are the extra close couplings. And now we have the Hunt couplings elite ultra close couplings, and these are a little bit too close for comfort. So we always like a compromise, and here we have one extra close coupling and one ultra close coupling, and this is a solution that I find suitable for use at Chadwick. It gives me a safety margin, and of course I can always change it in the future. So now let's take a look at KDs. Now using these KDs size 18, they do gauge perfectly well. And the gap between the buffers is round about 1.5 feet. And then looking at them on the Helix, that's absolutely fine. So how do these two siphons stack up against each other? I think it's worth talking about price. I think this is about £53, and this, when it first came out in 1979, was £12, and it was £8 second hand. Well, there we are. But to be perfectly honest, they don't stack up at all, because this has pizza cutter wheels, and this is a piece of code 75 track, and these can't run on it. Also, I hear you mutter, but I've got code 100. Well, to be perfectly honest, they don't run that well on code 100 either, because you get shorts across a diamond crossing, and double slips and slips don't excuse the phone, double slips and slips don't perform that well either. But of course you can change the wheels out. These pizza cutter wheels you can replace with wheels from Peter's Spares, and as you can see here, they're £3 a pair, which makes £6 a wagon, plus the £5 postage and packing, gets you up to £11 per wagon. Oh, it's also worth mentioning that you can't take out these wheel sets and put in wheels from Bachmann or Hornby, because the Lima axles are actually shorter, so therefore if you put the Bachmanns in, the Bachmann and Hornby ones won't turn, which is why you either need to find someone with a lathe and sort of machine down these original wheels, but you still get the shorting out issues, or you go and kneel at the altar of Peter's Spares. If you want to keep these things going, then that's probably the way to do it. Clearly the new wheels don't ride on the sleeper chairs, and I've also replaced the couplings. All I did was took a pair of snips and cut off the old D-link and then replaced it with a standard coupling from, I think, of Hornby or Bachmann, the ones you buy in the shops, trimmed it down a little, drilled a hole and put a bolt through it, and it's just fine. Of course, how does it stack up against the Acura Scale one? Well, at first glance it looks okay, but make no bones about it, it certainly is not in the same field. Price is always interesting though, isn't it? Because the Acura Scale ones retail at just a couple of quid over £50, I think at £53, £54, whereas the Lima one, when it was new, was 12 and £8 in a good used condition. It's great. It costs less than the wheels cost now, but there we go. Right, enough of all this fun. What else is I wanted to cover? Couplings, buffer distance, third radius curves, back-to-backs, formations. Let's talk about formations. Now there are a few books worth talking about here, so much so that I'll even put my glasses on. Carriage Working Notice, Loco Hauled Trains, May 73 till May 74. Now in these type of booklets, and you get them at model railway shows, it gives you the breakdown of all the trains. It tells you there's 1 BSK, 3 TSOs, RB, but not only passengers, but obviously freight stock. Beautiful. Next one, same sort of thing, locomotive operated trains. And again, it gives you all that relevant information of what actually makes up the train, how many siphons and all the rest of it. It's always a good book to study, and the only one I could find is GWR siphons, really. This retailed at $14.95. You can get them on eBay for 25 quid. As far as the Siphon G, there's not a great deal of information in it. It's rather on the technical side, and diagram numbers and all that. And it's a lot of guff, really. British Railways non-passenger rolling stock. This is quite interesting, and lots of interesting pictures and the condition, but sadly it's black and white. And these two books here, I'd like to thank Dick Smith for the lend of. British Railways coaching stock, various years. This one's 1980, and in the back it gives you the running numbers of the Siphon Gs that are still in operation. Beautiful. Then we get into sort of the glossy books that we all use, and I do like the Heyday range, and like for an example in here, there's a nice high neck here pulling a rake of blue Siphon Gs. Lovely. So there's lots of information out there, and one of my favourites of all is the moving the goods range. I think there's 10 or 12 in the range, and this one, number 8, livestock and birds. And if you happen to live on the East Coast or whatever, and you say, yeah, we don't get any Siphon Gs around there, that was strictly a West Country thing. Well, think again. I mean, there's an A4 hauling a a parcels train up the East Coast, and there's lots of other steam engines here pulling Siphon Gs, and there's one there, a steamer pulling a Siphon G with a rake of passengers. And these are the sort of things now that we need to look at, because the siphons and subsequently the govs were obviously installed in massive parcel trains, because that's how the world worked. I mean, there was no sort of Amazon delivery lorry or a DPD wagon banging on your door saying, here's your Amazon package. The parcel service was integral to the railway, and you had the national carriers limited depots dotted all around the country, and that's how we moved parcels. But of course, you can also have your gov at your start of your train on your sort of post-war era, so that when there was a shortage of brake goods, brake goods, then you would just bung a gov or a Siphon G in its place. So let's go and take a look at some examples of those. So starting off in the Western region, here we've got 1072, which I believe is Western Glory, pulling a parcels train. And as you can see, there's a gov, and behind the gov I believe there's a pair of Siphon Gs, behind that another 2 govs, and the train goes on. Sticking with the West Country, this is probably Western Cavalier with a gov, then a Siphon G, probably an NOV, and then a full brake. Adding a dash of colour to the mix is a 47, pulling 3 Siphon Gs, then a brake second, maybe some CCTs, that's covered carriage trucks, and another brake second as they disappear into the distance. Clearly you can see from this is a post tops image, so they're kicking around for quite some time. And just to prove it's not all about the West Country, here we go under the wires, and we have 2 govs followed by a Siphon G, and I believe it's a 50-foot LMS parcels after that, and then another gov. Heading back to the West Country, I think we are now, and in this 47 is pulling a Siphon G and a full brake. And then we have a Western region bound 47 going through Newbury inbound to Paddington, I imagine, from the 1V06, and she's got a gov in front of a full express passenger train. Here's an interesting Siphon G in a preserved area, or perhaps pre-preserved, and just up here you can see the carmine red peeping through from underneath the crimson paint. And finally you can see the state of this one, which is still in service, and I imagine it's had a bit of blue touch-up. Now the reason these things ended up in such a dreadful condition is they weren't allowed, well apparently they weren't allowed through a train wash because of the way the planking and the louvres worked. They would tear the bristles from the train wash, so they were never sent through an automatic train wash. So I think basically they never got washed, and if there were a train of Govs and CCTs, obviously nothing got washed, and hence they ended up in such a, what should we say, sad condition. Right, let's look at some trains on the layout. Now it wasn't unusual to find a Siphon G tagged along behind a motor parcels van. Now this Siphon G is an old Lima one with the pizza cutter wheels, and it's heading towards a diamond crossing. And if you remember, I said that there was a problem with these wheels on diamond crossings, so you're about to witness a short. And there it is, and it clears the short and off it goes. But you get my point that the original Limas do come with their issues. Now I think it's worth mentioning what this western parcel is actually made up of. So obviously we've got a western hauling a Gov, then we've got an NOV, then we have an Acura Scale Siphon G, then we have the 50-foot LMS parcels, then we have an SPV, Then we have another gov, then another 2 Siphon Gs, followed by a full brake and a covered carriage truck. None of these are out of context with this train. They're all vacuum braked and all rated at express passenger speeds. The Lima range also included an N parts version, and N parts rolling stock was used to transfer British Rail spares between depots, which takes me on to the current Acura Scale range, because they too have an N parts. And here is their N parts in olive green. Notice it has no N doors, but it is the modern twist on the Siphon G. Within the range there are a couple of the GWR brown versions used for the milk carriers, and then interestingly there is an overseas ambulance train in Ward Car olive green, which sort of makes a bit of a twist to it really. And then moving on to the pre-grouping days, there is the carmine red, then one of my favourites, which must be the BR maroon. That takes us up to the more modern times, and then obviously you've got a couple of options with the BR blue, and there is the newspaper version, which is quite decent really. And here's the details with the price of $54.95, and you'll find a link down below which will take you to the Acura Scale website. Well, hopefully you see what I mean by inserting, let's say, a blue Siphon G into your blue-grey rake of coaches, or put in a maroon buffet car just to break it up and make it more realistic. During the transition when you know BR went from the big four to BR and on to sort of post tops, these things all changed colours, but of course the wagons didn't change colour at the same time, so it adds variety into your trains. So hopefully you found it interesting, and if you'd like to purchase one of those Acura Scale Siphon Gs, I have left a affiliate link down below, so give it a click and see what you think. In the meantime, that's me done. I'm back to building in 2 weeks' time, and in the meantime, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, and if you want to become a patron and help support the channel, there's the button, there's the subscriber button. Subscribing is free. It's what keeps us YouTubers going, and there's a video here and here. See you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks a lot, take care, bye bye.